Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're diving into, well, I guess you could say the heart of the Italian Renaissance.
Sounds exciting.
It is. We're going to be looking at Botticelli's The Birth of Venus. And we've got some really interesting sources to help us understand this iconic work.
I'm ready when you are.
Great. So first things first, we're in 15th century Florence, right? A city overflowing with creativity and artistic energy. And a lot of that is thanks to the Medici family.
Absolutely. The Medici were, well, they were more than just patrons of the arts. They were shaping the entire cultural landscape of the Renaissance.
They were really involved in the intellectual movements of the time, too, like Neoplatonism, which I think for anyone who's not familiar, it was all about connecting classical philosophy with Christian thought.
Right, exactly. And that fascination with beauty, the idea that beauty could lead to spiritual understanding, that's a really important concept when we're trying to make sense of Botticelli's work.
Okay, so let's look at the birth of Venus through that lens. The first thing that jumps out, at least to me, is Venus herself. I mean, she's completely nude. That couldn't have been, like, the norm in 15th century Florence.
Oh, it definitely wasn't. But her nudity is super important here. It's not supposed to be erotic. It's about purity and divine beauty. Think back to those classical sculptures like the Venus Pudica.
Where she's kind of covering herself up.
Exactly. Botticelli is playing with that same idea, but he gives it this elegant, almost Gothic spin.
It's interesting how he draws on those classical influences, but also makes it his own. And speaking of influences, what about those wind gods, Zephyr and Aura? They're almost blowing Venus towards the shore.
Yeah, they create this real sense of movement, like we're witnessing something important unfolding. Actually, there's even some debate about who the nymph is. Some scholars say it's Aura, who represents a gentle breeze, while others argue for Chloris, a flower nymph.
Oh, wow. So even their identities add to the symbolism.
But regardless of their names, they represent this powerful force, this wind that's propelling Venus towards the shore, towards the earthly realm.
It's like they're ushering in a new era or something. And then we've got the Hora of spring waiting on the shore with that incredibly detailed floral robe.
She's a stark contrast to Venus, isn't she?
Yeah, definitely. Like Venus is all about divine beauty. And the Hora represents the richness and abundance of the material world.
Exactly. It's almost as if Botticelli is showing us how beauty can bridge these two worlds, the spiritual and the earthly.
And even the landscape, even though it's not realistic, it adds to this otherworldly atmosphere. It's like we're stepping into a dream. So, okay, we've got this beautiful goddess, these symbolic figures, a mysterious landscape, and the Medici family with their Neoplatonic ideas looming in the background. How do we even begin to understand what this painting is really about?
Well, that's the thing about The Birth of Venus. It's open to multiple interpretations, and each one gives us a unique glimpse into the Renaissance worldview. Why don't we start with the most common theory, the Neoplatonic interpretation?
This is where we bring the Manchi back into the picture, right?
Precisely.
Because they believed that beauty was a pathway to spiritual enlightenment. And this painting could be seen as a visual representation of that idea.
Exactly. The idea is that by contemplating Venus's beauty, her perfection, the viewer could be elevated to a higher understanding of love and the divine.
So it's not just a pretty picture, it's a tool for spiritual reflection.
Exactly.
But it gets even more interesting because some scholars believe that the painting was actually a wedding gift, maybe even commissioned to celebrate a Medici marriage.
Oh, that's interesting. And you know, when you think about it, the symbolism does kind of fit with that idea. You've got the shell, which is a symbol of fertility, and the Hora of spring, representing new beginnings.
So it could be a visual guide to marital harmony, with Venus embodying the ideals of beauty and love that a bride should aspire to.
Yeah, absolutely. A visual guide, a celebration of marriage.
A wedding gift. Wow. But wait, there's another theory, isn't there? Some people think that it's all about Lorenzo de' Medici, the Magnificent.
Ah, yes, Lorenzo. There are a few things that point in that direction. First, you've got the laurel trees, which were a symbol associated with Lorenzo, and then there are rumors that the model for Venus might have been Simonetta Vespucci, a woman who Lorenzo admired.
So maybe it's a subtle tribute to Lorenzo.
Yeah.
Positioning him as like a divinely inspired figure.
It's definitely possible.
Okay, so we've got Neoplatonic philosophy, a possible wedding celebration, and a tribute to Lorenzo de' Medici. Are there any other layers to uncover here?
Well, there's actually one more theory, and this one goes in a totally different direction. Art historian Charles Armac, he suggests that the painting could be like a really complex allegory, celebrating Lorenzo de' Medici, but not just as Lorenzo. He sees him as a new Alexander the Great, and Florence as the successor to ancient Rome.
Wow, okay. That's quite a leap. What makes him think that?
So Mack points to a few things, like those laurel trees. We talked about how they're linked to Lorenzo, but they were also associated with Alexander the Great. And then there's the way Venus is standing. It's similar to how the Romans depicted their goddesses.
So he's saying that Botticelli is using those classical images to elevate Lorenzo and Florence, like giving them this mythical status.
Exactly, connecting them to this whole lineage of greatness.
That's fascinating. It's incredible how Botticelli blends all these layers of meaning together. But, okay, before we go too far down the rabbit hole of symbolism, I'm curious about the more technical aspects of the painting. What can you tell us about Botticelli's actual painting technique?
Oh, it's just as interesting as the symbolism, trust me. One thing that stands out is his choice of canvas. Back then, most artists were using wood panels, but canvas was cheaper and easier to work with.
Oh, I didn't realize that. So why do you think he chose canvas?
Well, it could suggest that the painting wasn't meant for a super formal setting, like a church or a palace.
Or like a wealthy family's villa.
Exactly, something a little more casual. And then there's the paint itself. Botticelli used tempera, which is made by mixing pigments with egg yolk.
Interesting. I've never worked with tempera.
It dries really quickly, which is why you see so much detail in the painting. But it also creates this incredible luminous effect that's hard to get with other types of paint.
Yeah, you can really see that in Venus. Like the way light seems to radiate from her, especially with those gold highlights in her hair.
That's the magic of tempera. Botticelli would layer these translucent colors, and the light would pass through and reflect back, creating this sense of depth and radiance. It's a technique that requires incredible precision and patience.
It's just stunning. And, it's perfect for capturing that idealized beauty that was so central to the Renaissance. But speaking of beauty, I can't help but notice that Venus's anatomy isn't exactly anatomically correct.
Ah, yes. And the perspective is a little off too, isn't it? Like everything is flattened out.
Yeah, exactly.
That's another interesting thing about Botticelli's style. He wasn't really going for photorealism. He was more interested in conveying a symbolic and spiritual truth.
I see. So those elongated limbs, the graceful curves, they're all part of his effort to create an idealized vision of beauty.
Precisely. A vision that goes beyond the limitations of the physical world. And because of his mastery of these techniques, Botticelli's vision has continued to resonate throughout history, influencing artists for centuries. I mean, even today in the 21st century, people are still captivated by his work.
It's true. Speaking of its journey through time, I can't believe this painting actually survived Savonarola's bonfire of the vanities. That's where they burned tons of art that they considered immoral.
It's incredible, right? I mean, this is a painting of a nude goddess, and it survived. It says a lot about the power of art. It can transcend political and religious turmoil and connect with something deeper within us. And, the birth of Venus has gone way beyond the art world at this point. It's become a cultural icon.
It has. I mean, it's been in everything from Lady Gaga music videos to Adobe Illustrator's splash screen.
Yeah.
It's amazing how a painting created over 500 years ago can still have such a powerful impact. It speaks to the timelessness of those themes, of beauty, mythology, and artistic innovation.
Absolutely.
So as we start to wrap up our deep dive into the birth of Venus, I'm left feeling this sense of awe and wonder, but also this renewed curiosity. There's just so much to discover, so many layers to uncover. What about you? What does the birth of Venus mean to you?
It's a question that people have been asking for centuries, really. Is she a symbol of divine love? Is it a celebration of earthly beauty? Or maybe, even a political statement. But that's the beauty of this painting, I think. It's ambiguous. It doesn't give us easy answers. It makes us think, makes us come up with our own interpretations.
Yeah, it really does. It's like Botticelli is saying, here's this masterpiece. What do you see?
Yeah.
It's the power of great art.
Yeah.
It starts conversations. It challenges us to think differently.
Mm-hmm.
What about you? What stands out to you the most in this painting?
For me, I think it's how Botticelli captures this moment or transition. Venus is between two worlds, the divine realm that she's coming from and the earthly realm that she's about to enter. It's like a split second frozen in time, full of potential, but also uncertainty. And it reminds me of how fluid human experience really is, always changing.
I love that. It makes me think about the shell. It's this symbol of birth and fertility, but also, like you were saying earlier, the Neoplatonists saw it as a vessel for the soul's journey. So it's almost like Venus is bringing all of that with her, all the beauty and wisdom of the divine as she starts this new chapter.
That's a really beautiful connection. And it reminds us that even though this painting is rooted in Renaissance symbolism, It speaks to these universal themes,
Hmm.
love, beauty, transformation.
Exactly. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Botticelli's The Birth of Venus, I'm in awe. There's always more to explore, more to learn, and I think that's what's so exciting about art.
I agree. And I think the most important thing is to just keep looking, keep questioning, and let art ignite your curiosity. Because there's no one right answer. The meaning is what you make it.
Beautifully said. I hope this deep dive has given everyone a new appreciation for Botticelli's masterpiece, and maybe even inspired you to keep exploring the amazing world of Renaissance art. So until next time, keep those minds curious and those imaginations going.